And I said, Mom, you have to drive me to the start. Don't you see this is going to help to set women free? You know, this is going to help to change things. And for the first time, I think in her adult life, she, you know, I could see the tears coming into her eyes and her lips starting to quiver. And I said, you have to drive me, don't you see? And she said, okay, get the keys.
We don't want what Julie did to turn this into a freak show.
Some people, I'm sure, had funny feelings about it. I know the men did. I didn't really care.
It's not, about skin color and, all these other socioeconomic differences. You want your team to win.
I'm Celine Yeager.
I'm Sara Gross.
This is 9, Voices for Title IX, powered by Inside Tracker.
A podcast that tells the stories behind the law that changed everything.
This is 9. 9.
Hey, Sarah.
Hi, Celine.
So this week is exciting because we have your interview, or one of your interviews that you did with Bobbi Gibb for this series. And, I think this is really interesting because along with being a pro triathlete for 14 years and an Ironman champion, and you are the founder and CEO at Feisty, you also have a PhD in women's history. And you have shared that your goal with that is to take women and get them into the pages of history because we've been left out so much, right? And when I listened to this interview, all I could think of is I didn't know anything about this woman. So I was so glad that you pulled this page, this forgotten woman out, and you've put her into the annals of history. And it was just really, really cool. And you can tell people a little bit about Bobbi Gibb, because what an amazing woman.
Yeah, I was so thrilled. Honestly, we actually had reached out to Kathrine Switzer, who gets a lot of media attention around being, is often said to be the first woman who ran the Boston Marathon, and she actually got a bib that she put K Switzer on. So she was officially in the race. But Bobbi, the year before, had actually applied to get a bib and was told that women weren't capable. She was running up to 40 miles at a time, just in general, because
she was an ultra runner.
Yeah. Before that was a thing. Like she was just like a girl who loved to run turned into a young woman who loved to run. And she got this letter back that sort of said like, oh, well, you can't because women aren't capable of that. And she's like, what the hell? Like I did that last week or whatever, And I just I love this interview so much. First of all, Bobbi's turning 80 this year, right? So that there is that historical piece, and the fact that she at the time understood herself, when she, you'll hear it later, she starts to talk about how she understood in some way that she had to go there and prove that women could run 26 miles because she knew that they could, because she did.
Even more than that though, she's what struck me so much is she comes out of the gate with this interview talking about women's place in the world and how they were medicated and just sold dish soap and told that they should be happy. The happiness should be in how clean their family's clothes are, right? But she saw that her mother was not happy, but her mother sort of had bought into this. And there's that moment where she's literally talking to her mom saying, this is our chance to set women free. And that just moved me a lot.
Yeah. Likewise. It's the other moment for me. And I had trouble introducing Bobbi because she's so many things, she's clearly an athlete, but she's also has a very spiritual side, which you hear coming out in the interview. She's also highly intelligent. She went to law school as well. And in that generation where, my own mother, who's younger than Bobbi, still felt like she only had choices of nursing and teaching. She definitely she's just such a well-rounded person. It's hard to introduce her, but she's also an artist. And so during the interview, when she pulled out her sculpture and just said she had this image of a woman being able to be feminine and strong at the same time, and she needed to sculpt that. And it's wow, someone was able to have that vision at a time. Like it's easy to envision that now, because as much as we do get pushback around what we're supposed to do as women and how strong we're supposed to look and everything else, like I think there is a cultural space for a woman to be strong and considered feminine now. Like that space has been opened up, but back then, like who were her role models? It's incredible to me, the vision this woman has.
The goddesses were her role models. Like
Oh
she talks
yeah.
about that, which is like so awesome.
Yes. Yeah, it absolutely is amazing. Okay, I feel like we're
Now let's let the show talk for itself. We could go on forever, but it was awesome.
yeah, exactly. So I do want to give a shout out. We do want to give a shout out first to our sponsors as well, because the ads aren't just here just to be ads. These are companies who, and we had, I should say this, like we had companies jump at this. Like when we were like, hey, we want to do this series about Title IX and the impact it had on sport. Like these are the companies that were like, yes, I really want to be part of that. We heard back from them really quickly. So yeah, so we'll just give a nod to them and then hear from Bobbi.
Raise your hand if you believe we need more women and more overall diversity at our triathlons. Now keep that hand up if you want to be part of the solution. The team at Lifetime, the nation's premier healthy way of life brand, is right there with you. Their main focus? The iconic Verizon New York City Triathlon, coming up on July 24th. For this year's New York City Tri, Lifetime replaced their registration lottery, added a duathlon distance, and implemented a rookie refund program, all to get more racers, like you, of every age, skill level, and background to take on the concrete jungle. They have women, but not enough. They have non-binary participants, but they need more. They have athletes from 39 states and 17 countries, but they want to cover every corner of the globe. Let's write a better future for endurance sports together. Visit nyctri.com today to reserve your spot to race the greatest city in the world. That's nyctri.com.
Female hair loss is a topic few of us want to talk about, but it impacts nearly 30 million women, so we should. And that's why we appreciate that Bonafide's healthy hair and scalp product, Silvessa, is one of our show partners. With Silvessa, Bonafide designed the first comprehensive system designed to restore and protect hair and skin affected by estrogen decline from the inside and out. It consists of a 3-part system containing a daily capsule, hair serum, and skin serum to be combined for healthier looking skin and hair. During a 12-week clinical study, Bonafide found that 92% of women saw improvement in hair volume, 82% saw improvement in hair thickness, and 67% saw improvement in scalp coverage. Over 8,300 uncompensated doctors in the U.S. recommend Bonafide's products. All of their products are prescription and hormone-free. And for listeners today, we want to give you 20% off your first purchase of Silvessa and/or any of Bonafide's products when you subscribe to any product. Just go to hellobonafide.com/Title9 and use the promo code Title9. That's hellobonafide, BONAFIDE.com/Title9, and the code Title9, all caps, TITLE, and the number 9 for 20% off at checkout. For the best prices and free shipping, go directly to the hellobonafide.com/Title9 website. That is their best offer anywhere, so check it out and use the promo code Title9 today.
Hi, Bobbi. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, it's such a pleasure to be here and to meet you. I'm very impressed with what you're doing.
And I am very impressed with you.
Thanks.
Of course, I've heard your name for many years and read about your story. But yesterday, when I was preparing for this interview, I listened to this narrative podcast. You weren't actually interviewed on it, but it was about your story. And then it was a 2-part podcast. I had your story and then Kathrine Switzer's story. And when the host was describing your journey and how much you loved running, and your desire to it's just this pure desire just to run and being told no, I actually started weeping.
Oh,
And I was trying to get my kid ready for school and she was looking at me like, what is wrong?
that's the sweetest thing I've ever heard. Thank you.
So tell me, when did you first start running and when did you find that love for running?
I first started running when I was about a year old.
A year.
Yeah, and never stopped. I mean, you know how, first we crawl and then we stand up and we sort of walk and then we run. Well, I just love to run. And my dad would take me to, we lived in Watertown. He worked at MIT. It was during the war. I was born in 1942. So this was during World War II. And he was working on the war effort and we were living in Watertown, but there was a little park near where we live, Waverly Park, and he would take me to the park, and I was just so filled with joy and energy, and it was green in the summer and the grass, and my little legs would just run and run and run, and the world would kind of wish by, and I just never stopped running. I always loved to run, and I grew up and I was still running, and I got through to school. I was still running, and I used to love to run in the woods with the neighborhood dogs. In those days, all the dogs were off a leash. They ran free. We had about a half a dozen big neighborhood dogs. And I used to love to go up in the woods and just run and run and run. And then I'd flop down and I look up and look at the sky and the clouds and the trees. And I just had a sense of joy, I guess, of beginning. And then all my little girlfriends stopped running when they got to be adolescent. And I was still running in the woods with the dogs. I just always loved to run. I just got to feel this universal energy kind of pouring through me. And and this is funny, but and this might have come from my grandmother, Nana, my Nana. I love my Nana. She was my father's mother, and she was the most wonderful, warm, loving person, and I just adored her. And when I would visit her house, we'd be out in her gardens, and it was like the Garden of Eden. And she had a tame catbird that would eat raisins out of her hand and everything. And so I always felt this sense of love, like love in the sunshine, love in the wind, love all around me, love within, all around. I mean, just I've always felt that. I mean, I feel it even now. I mean, even here sitting where I am, and I think that's what really informed my running, the sense of freedom and the sense of love. And then as an adolescent, I began to see what was ahead of me as a woman in this society with the woman's very constricted roles. And I could see how unhappy my mother was. She was an intelligent, beautiful woman, and she had always wanted to be a journalist and travel around the world. I mean, she loved my dad and they loved each other, but it was the social convention of the times. It was very limiting. A woman couldn't even get a credit card without her husband's signature and so forth. So I was beginning to become very rebellious about this thing that I could see up ahead. And so I grew up during the 40s and the 50s. And so you asked me, when did I start to run? That was it. And I just never stopped.
Yeah.
I still run today.
Wow. Okay. We'll come back to that because I would love to know your running routine now. But that's what their story is so relatable, because I myself had a similar experience of being a young person and realizing that it's in a different generation, realizing that my opportunities were going to be limited because I was female. So like, when did you first, do you have specific memories when you knew, or when you realized, or when some message came to you? Like, how did you know that?
I could see my mother and I could see all her friends. I could see the neighborhood, and I loved children and I wanted to be married, but I could not live in this little box. And these women were radically unhappy because they had to give up themselves. I mean, a woman was supposed to sacrifice herself for her family and her husband and so forth. And they were so unhappy. And so they started drinking a little wine in the afternoon and take tranquilizers to kind of dull the edge of this pain of their existence. Was cleaning the bathroom floor, doing the laundry, doing the shopping, doing the cooking. That's all they could do. I mean, there was no, you couldn't get into medical school, you couldn't get into law school, and if you did, people looked at a professional woman as an oddity. I mean, she didn't fit in. She was not a woman because she didn't do, she wasn't in love with her dish detergent, which is they tell you on the TV, and your new vacuum cleaner, and this is supposed to make you happy. And these women were very unhappy. And so I could see this even as a fairly young person. I think by the time I got into 7th grade was probably when it really started to hit home for me.
And was running then kind of an escape from that in a way?
Yes.
Because I can imagine
Running,
that would be very mentally distressing.
running was an escape from these horrible constricting ideas, and from my parents, especially ironically, my mother. She spent almost her entire adult life trying to get me to conform to these same deadening norms that had made her life so awful. And I wouldn't. I was this free, untamable spirit. And I would go off and run in the woods with the dogs, and I would feel free. So I was running away from this social pressure and this parental pressure to conform to this. I was going to go live in the wilds of Canada, and with my dogs and horses, and not just anything to get away from this. And then in the woods, I found this freedom. And I think I'm harking back to a time, my grandmother, my Nana, she had a sculpture of Diana, the goddess of the hunt, on her stairwell, where she had kind of a little balcony there. And I think subconsciously I must have picked this up, that at one time women ran through the woods with their hunting dogs, and she had a bow and arrow on her, and it's like, so this completely different view and image and stereotype of women than what had ruled the world for the past millennia, basically.
I love that. I studied ancient history, so I can picture what you're looking at with Diana.
Yes.
And I
Don't you just love the ancient Greek?
absolutely. Yeah. And when, I think this is going a different direction, but like cultures that have multiple gods with different genders, the roles play out differently,
Right. It's completely different. And these gods and goddesses weren't taken literally. I mean, they represented certain aspects of reality.
Yeah, I remember learning. I'm not religious really at all now, but learning that like there's a Jewish tradition where there's a god Sophia, who Sophia means knowledge and wisdom. Right. And I'm like, oh, imagine, it just struck my imagination. Like, imagine growing up in a space where you had a goddess of wisdom called Sophia. That was your god, instead of, a father and a son or whatever,
Well, the father and the son is fine, but they're missing.
They're missing something. Yeah.
Mary is the remnant of the original goddess, the great goddess, the great mother. This idea of the mother goddess, the nurturer, the all giver, and so forth, is very, very ancient. And I think it's something that the human psyche craves, is that union of the male and the female. And each one of us, I think, has a male and a female part of us, the anima and animus. This is what Jung got into in his theories too. And this idea of the female goddess, not the warring gods, but the birthing. This birthing. And I remember I had my child, a natural childbirth, in fact, born on the way to the hospital in the back of a camper.
Wow. And, accidental natural childbirth.
It was, no, I wanted to have it, but I didn't realize it was going to be
so quick,
quite so painful and take so long. And so I thought, well, maybe we better just go in, and I got into the van, and so the kid was born on the way.
Wow.
And I'm thinking, oh, they give medals for running marathons, and women have been doing this for thousands of years. I mean, one of my ancestors had 13 children 13 children with no doctors anywhere in sight. And I think, oh my God. So this idea of the bringer of life, the giver of life, this must have been amazing to primitive people, like, oh, this one human being growing inside of another human being, and it suddenly emerges. It's like how did she do that? There's this magic, like, and it was so amazing being pregnant because I could feel this little human being, starting going through all the processes of evolution from one-celled creature and then becoming more, going through all the phylums, and then finally emerging as this baby. Is like, it was the most miraculous thing in my life.
Yes.
And I don't know. And so this idea of woman as the giver of life, the bringer of life, the all giver, is something that we really need to add. I'm not saying we should eliminate the other things, that we should add to this warrior kind of mentality. And maybe this would help us do what I think we really need to do as a human race, and that is to eliminate war and just say, I'm sorry, war is murder. We can't do this anymore. It's destroying, we're destroying the human race, we're destroying the earth. We have to stop war. We have to develop the international institutions, a democratic international institutions through which we can solve these conflicts, not trial by war, but trial by human experience and human knowledge and human intelligence. And so that's a big thing I'm working on now. And I know it's possible. We just need to expand our consciousness another level.
Yeah.
And a lot of us already have, but we will. We're moving in that direction.
Yeah.
And I'm just hoping and praying that we can get there before there's another catastrophe.
Right. I love your vision, by the way. I love big thinkers.
My vision is that all the nations of the world are democracies in which every person on earth has human rights and civil rights, and we have governments in which governments through which people ensure their own human and civil rights and make laws that conduce to human well-being. And there are these international institutions through which we can resolve conflict. And we need to do that. And I was, in preparation for this, I was reviewing some of my memories and thoughts about growing up in the 60s and 70s, which we can get to if you want to. But how the democracy works. And people are cynical about it, and they say, oh, it's a big mess, everybody's disagreeing, nothing ever gets done. Yeah, well, that's part of democracy. You've got, in this country alone, you've got 350 million people, individuals with individual ideas, individual values, all, how do you make all that work and come out with something? But when you take the long picture and you look back at what we've done with this really new experiment in the world is democracy at this scale, an all-inclusive democracy. And this is part of why I love the marathon, because it is so democratic. But so it's coming forward, we can see how that develops even over the past 2 or 3, 4, even 4 decades. And I just feel that this is the way the world has to go.
And you said the marathon is democratic. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, it's in many, many ways. That was one of the things. I had never heard of the Boston Marathon, but I just loved to run. And I was running, as I say, in the woods with my dogs. And I saw the Boston Marathon for the first time. And it's in 1964, and I fell in love with it. And I didn't think men or women, I just saw these people running, and something inside me set, and you know how irrational love is. And I said, I want to be part of this thing. I didn't know anything about the BAA or the AAU. It was just, but the fact that I was sort of following my heart, and I was following this inner directive that was telling me to do something that was all against all social conventions, way outside the social norm. And I didn't know if I could do it or not, but something had said in me that I was going to be part of this race. And so this sense that the marathon was open to anyone in the world. That's what they told me. Anyone in the world. And of course, it started in ancient Greece. Yeah, anyone. And so it started in ancient Greece, you know, running from Marathon to Athens. And of course, that was a democracy, but it was only a democracy for male citizens. There were no slaves, and women weren't included. But now we have this democracy, is this huge democracy in which more and more people participate in this. And that's part of what the decades of the 60s and 70s have been, and what we're still doing now is including people. So this is a new experiment, you know, and this, I believe, is the way of the future, because the way of the past was that you'd have a dictator who by force controls everyone else in the society, and the dictators then fight with each other about territory and possessions and booty and who gets to you know, capture the women and so forth, which to me is sick. From my point of view. It's not healthy. We don't need to be doing this. And so democracy, so I see the marathon is this democratic sport. And now, even now we have people from all over the world. When I go to the Boston Marathon, there are people there of all races, all religions, all genders, you know, everywhere. And we just love each other. It's like a huge, in the 70s, we used to have love-ins. We sit around and we just kind of sit and just glow with love and love each other. So it's like we hugging each other with old friends, new friends. It's like a family reunion. And there are all these artificial boundaries that people build of, you know, race and gender and even age. They're just not there. And so this to me is democracy. It's like, it's who a person is matters, not what group they belong to. And so there we are. It doesn't matter what group you belong to. It's who you are as a person. And so I think if we can do it in Boston, we can do it in the world. That's my thing. And that's really the way I want to see the world go. And we're up against some problems, but I do believe that is the way of the future.
I love that. Okay, let's go to Boston 1966, because you applied to do the marathon. Like, you tried to go through official channels, am I right? And you were denied. What were you told at that point?
I was told that women were not physiologically able to run marathons. The longest distance accredited by the Amateur Athletic Union was 1.5 miles. The Boston Marathon is a men's division race, and women, of course, aren't qualified to run in men's division races any more than a man is qualified to run in a women's division race. Those are very definite fundamental rules of racing. And at the time, I had trained for 2 years, and we can back up and I'll tell you how I trained, but I was running 40 miles at a stretch. And I get this letter from Will Cloney, the race director. And, you know, and I was living in California at the time. I crumpled up the letter, I threw it away, and I did what I always do when I'm upset or angry or just totally pissed off. And sad, just here it is again. It's like, this is the tragedy of prejudice. If you belong to a certain group or a certain class of persons, you can't be who you are. You can't fulfill your destiny. These opportunities are totally denied to you. So here it was again, because you belong to this class of persons, you're not allowed, you're not even thought able to do these things. So how are you supposed to know you can do something if you're never allowed to try? And how can you prove you can do something if you're not allowed to do it? So I throw the letter and I go out the door and I run 20 miles up the coast to Del Mar, a little town right on the beach. I get to Del Mar, it's evening. I walk around, there are all these people cooking out on the beach and kids running around. And I walk around, people out there are so friendly. And so I'm walking around, oh, would you like a hot dog? Oh, would you like a hamburger? And so they were feeding me. I mean, so I was walking, oh, sure, thank you. And then I'd sit around the fire for a while. I actually slept on the beach that night. And then the next day I woke up and I said, all the more reason to run. Now I have to run the Boston Marathon, because now if I can prove this false belief about women wrong, I can throw into question all the other false beliefs about women that have been used basically to keep women subjugated for the past how many centuries. And so now my run took on a social significance. It wasn't just for my own pleasure. And so now I really had a purpose.
And so is it true? Then you got on a bus and
I
traveled
got
for
on a bus.
days to get to Boston
I
to do the race?
I got on a bus and I traveled for 3 nights and a little more than 3 days, and got to Boston the day before the race, if you can imagine. I knew nothing about it. I knew nothing. I mean, I had no coach. I had never, I could run. I was very strong by that time. And my parents thought I was nuts. Like, oh, she's gone around the bend now, and she thinks she's going to run the Boston Marathon. My dad was very worried about me. She thought, maybe she'll die out there on the course. And so my dad went steaming off. He had to get to a sailing regatta, and I said, Mom, you have to drive me to the start. Don't you see this is going to help to set women free? I mean, you're not happy. This is going to help to change things. And for the first time, I think in her adult life, she, I could see the tears coming into her eyes and her lips starting to quiver. And I said, you have to drive me, don't you see? And she said, okay, get the keys. I mean, I can almost cry thinking about it, her now, and how sad she was, And so she drove me. We went out the course and she drove me out to Hopkinton. And I knew that if the officials saw me, they would stop me. And I even thought I could get arrested. And I didn't know. So I was wearing my brother's Bermuda shorts. Everybody knows this story, in the tank top bathing suit. And these new boys running shoes that my friend in San Diego, Bill Gukin, had told me, you can't race in those nurses' shoes. They're too heavy. You got to get running shoes. And so I got these new shoes, and I didn't know you're supposed to break them in. I didn't know. My mother made a wonderful roast beef dinner with apple pie. I didn't know anything about carbo loading. I ate all this roast beef thinking, oh, this is going to make me really strong. And then I get to so she lets me out of the car. I run all the way around. I start running immediately. I go all the way around. I see the starting line. And I say, how am I going to get into this thing? I had a blue hooded sweatshirt, put my hair back. And then I found a little bush as close to the start as I could get. And then I went out and ran up and down in an alley for about 40 minutes. So I'd already run
Wow.
3 or 4 miles.
That was your warm up.
Yeah, before I even got to, and then as the starting time drew close, I got back into behind the bushes, and I waited until the gun went off and the men's division race left. Now I didn't realize this till later, I was the sole woman in the yet to be sanctioned women's division race, now called the Pioneer Division Women's Race. So that year, the women's division race was actually about 30 miles, and it wound all around Hopkinton. And then it joined in with a men's division race, and I ran along to Boston. The men were really friendly, thank goodness. They could have easily pushed me out of the race.
Right. So you start running, you run your few miles warm up, you jump into the race, you start running. At some point, you must have had to take your hood down, or some people must have started to recognize, oh, hey, there's a woman on the course. Like, what was the reaction?
Well, to that, I give the men credit, because it took about 3 minutes, and I had my hood on and everything. It was floppy shorts, the whole thing. Is that a woman? Is that a woman? They're studying my anatomy from the rear. and they very quickly realized I was a woman. And so I could hear them talking, and I turned around and laughed. I wanted to keep it upbeat because I wasn't running against the men. I wanted to run with them. And they got that. They really understood that what my idea was. I would show that women could run a marathon and run it well. And then they would just have to open it up to women because they had no excuse now to keep it closed. So the men were really supportive. And then I said I was getting hot with this. So I took the sweatshirt off. It was a hot day. And then everyone could see I was a woman. And again, when you're doing something really far outside the social norm, people can be hostile. But in this case, people loved it. And the men were cheering and the women were cheering and clapping and atta go girly. Even the policemen would go, atta go girly, don't let them catch you, and this sort of thing. And it was just this great celebration of spring, which is what I always thought the marathon was.
Right. Right. And you ran fairly fast. I mean, you ran 3:20 something.
I know. And the terrible irony is that I was on a sub 3-hour race for most of that race. And I wasn't tired. I was holding back because I didn't know how much energy, it was the first marathon I'd ever run. I didn't know how much energy I would need to finish. So I was always holding back, but keeping on this steady sub 3-hour mile race. And then we got to Wellesley, and of course the women went crazy. And went Wellesley College about halfway, and the women were out there in the street. And in those days, there were 2 lines, and they'd hold hands. You had to run, you had to duck down and run between these women, and they were just going crazy. And I've told this story so many times. And there's one woman with a bunch of kids, she's going, Ave Maria, Ave Maria. And then later I met Diana Chapman Walsh, who was then a student, and she remembers this. She later became the president of Wellesley. And she said, we knew you were coming because the press knew I was coming, and a local radio station was broadcasting my progress. So they were following me all the way. And so she said, we were looking for you, and then they let out the scream when they could see me. And it's like, at that moment, we knew we could never go back. Like this really was a pivotal moment that was going to change things, because, and we all knew it at that moment at Wellesley, we all knew that things could never be the same again after this. And I went all the way into Boston, but the last few miles, the horrible blisters on my feet they broke through, and the bleeding blisters, and my pace dropped way off. I was tiptoeing along. At one point, I actually took my shoes off, and I was running barefoot. They were so painful. And then the bottoms of my feet hurt. I put my shoes back on, and finally, I finished, and I came down and finished. I mean, I knew I had to finish because I had this whole weight of responsibility. If I'd not finished, it would have set women back another 50 years. So I finished, and I was disappointed in my time, but in retrospect, it was an amazing time. I finished ahead of 2/3 of the other runners, and I had drunk no water. I didn't know you're supposed to drink water on this hot day. No water, bleeding blisters after a 3,000-mile bus trip, and a huge meal of roast beef that was still sitting in my stomach. I couldn't have done any more. I mean, anything. I just no experience in this, and I, oh God, it was amazing I could run it all.
It's an amazing accomplishment in and of itself, with outside of the fact that, you had just made this massive breakthrough for womankind, I mean, it's incredible. Did you, at this time, did you have other like girlfriends in your life that played sport or that also liked to run, or were you kind of like an anomaly?
I was an anomaly. I didn't, I mean, in high school, we played half-court basketball. That was about it. I mean, no, there wasn't no other women. In fact, hardly any men ran. But for a woman to run in those days was, I mean, it was thought improper. Yeah, it was just, I mean, a woman had no way of supporting herself besides getting married. And my mother was always after me, like, how are you going to find a husband? You have to find a husband. How are you going to live? How are you going to support yourself? you'll be a social outcast, and you've got to stop running in the woods with the dogs, you know. And I wouldn't stop. And then later she said, you know, that I said, Mom, you're finally on my side. And she said, it's something I should have done a long time ago. She said, secretly, I admired you. I just thought I had to do this, you know, for your own good. So it wasn't for my own good, but she thought, because she loved me, and she, you know, she thought if I didn't conform, that I'd be in big trouble.
Wow.
But I said, I can't conform. I'm going to change the world.
Yeah. And you also went to university and got at least a couple degrees, as I read yesterday.
Yeah.
Was that like an unusual choice to go to university?
Well, yes. My mother kept saying, you got to take some typing courses to have something to fall back on until you get married. And in fact, my first job out of high school, I was a nurse's aide, which was good. I liked taking care of people, but there wasn't much open for women. So I guess she was against the fact that I loved science. Of course, my dad was a brilliant scientist, and when I was younger, he taught me a lot of things. He got me a microscope, his first microscope that he'd had at MIT, and he gave it to me. And I used to look at things, and we'd get pond water, and I'd look at amoebas, and I was just fascinated with biology and this whole idea, and physics, like cosmology. And so I took courses in physics and biology and mathematics, which they basically, the whole class was men. And there I was sitting there taking these courses. But this is, the more I learned about science, the more amazing this universe seemed. I mean, it was almost like a spiritual experience. And I did take a trip across, this is the way I trained for the Boston Marathon. I had a VW van and a Malamute puppy, and I drove from Massachusetts to California. And every day I would run in a different spot. And I was in love with this country. I still am. I'm in love with this country and the people of this country, the people all across the country. And I wanted to see what the country was. And I'd never seen it before. So I headed west, and I spent the first night in the Berkshires. At night, I slept out under the stars. I love to camp. I'd been quite a good camper in my day, earlier when I was young. And I'd sleep out under the stars at night. And then during the day, I'd run wherever I was in different places. And I'd eat at truck stops and cafes, and I'd meet people and talk with them. And then at night, as I got into the Midwest, there weren't so many just open woods where I could sleep as there were in New England. And I get out there. And so I'd knock on farmer's door, and I said, would it be okay if I camped in your backyard, in your back field for the night? And he'd say, oh, sure, help yourself. So I'd camp there for the night. And so I was just totally in love with nature. And then at night, I look up at the stars with my binoculars. And by the time I got to Nevada, it was just amazing. Because I mean, I was so enthralled. Like, I was always, even from a young kid, like, why bother with all this? I mean, I still feel that, like, and the more I learn about like atoms and molecules, and how the intricate cell, as I learned how all these little chemical reactions going on, and we have trillions of cells in our bodies, and all these little chemical reactions going on, and there's the DNA, and you're translating it in a protein, and all this stuff going on, like it knows what it's doing. And I mean, it doesn't know the way we do consciously, but it's amazing. It's miraculous. It increased my sense of spiritual awareness. It didn't decrease it. It wasn't against religion. It was, if anything, it was expanding my sense of the miracle of existence. Like, we don't know why it's here. And for me, knowing that I don't know is like a spiritual experience. We don't know why it's here. And we have different ideas about how it got here. I mean, science has it, and different religions have. But we really don't know. We have these stories we tell, but we don't really know. And when you just come into the present moment and you're going, oh my God, we don't know why all this is here. We're breathing the air, no, and we're moving our fingers and we're thinking thoughts. I mean, I'm thinking, how does this mass of pinkish gray material in our heads have a thought, have a subjective experience, see color, feel feelings? I mean, this, to me, this is beyond the most miraculous mystery that could ever happen. And so I'm like totally immersed in this thing, going across the country, and also being an artist. It was beautiful to me. It was just beautiful. The patterns of dust in the road were beautiful, the trees. I'm going, wow, the trees are growing here all by themselves. And everybody else is going, duh, yeah, the trees grow by themselves, a big deal. And I'm going, this is amazing, this is a miracle. They're growing by themselves, nobody put them here. Don't you see how amazing that is? And I get out to Nevada and I'm looking, I'd never seen so many stars. And I've said this before, there were more stars than dark places. And the immensity of this thing, the immensity of it was just, it just blew my mind. I mean, I was in tears. I was looking up at this thing and I'm going, oh my God, we're this little tiny planet, this tiny planet rotating around a sun. Now, how many of us get up in the morning and say, oh, there's my favorite star on the horizon. And look at that, we're turning around and see this, we can see this star from all these different angles. And we're going around the star, and the star is in an arm of a galaxy, and the galaxy is in this universe. That was my orientation. That's the way I'm thinking. I'm not just driving down Main Street and honking at pedestrians. I'm driving through an arm of the galaxy, and so I'm out here, and this is like blew my mind. And then on into California and plunged into the Pacific. It was just an amazing experience. And that's the way I trained for the marathon.
Wow. Yeah, what I'm hearing is like your love of learning and your sense of wonder, kind of came with you on this journey, like through running too. And also like perhaps helped you not to get bogged down in some of the other things that you were observing, like, like the plight of women, your own mother's challenges with her life, the opportunities that were maybe not available for us as women. So I'd like to do the podcast about Title IX and that law coming through. Yeah, I'd love to talk about that. I know you went to law school shortly after.
You did. You went to law school?
No, you did.
Oh, yeah. I went to law school too.
Sorry. No, I studied ancient history.
Oh, that's fantastic.
But no, I actually kind of wish I'd gone to law school, but I did not go to law school. But I know that you went to law school shortly after that law came into place. Like, when did you become aware that that there was a new law that was creating equal opportunity for women in an educational environment?
Well, as I say, growing up in the 60s and 70s, I was part of making those changes in different ways. I mean, running marathon was a pivotal event. Mm-hmm. But before that, I was working on a lot of other things. And Title IX, I think that came in 1972.
Yes,
if I'm
that's
not
correct.
mistaken, 1972, and it was Birch Bayh of Indiana, who is the senator who brought that before the Senate, and I think it was Patsy Mink from Hawaii and Edith Green from Oregon, who had originated this idea, this Title IX, if I'm remembering correctly, and it passed. It passed, and it dramatically changed the world of sports for women. It also changed educational opportunities for women. I think it was originally an amendment to an education bill, and it changed, and so that opened opportunities in education and also then in employment, because depending on your education, you're more or less qualified for different types of employment. And so that that bill was seminal, but it was part of a long line of civil rights advances that this country was making. And I mean, I remember 1964 when the original civil rights bill was signed into law by Johnson, and a lot of us had worked for this thing. And I mean, Kennedy had conceived of it in 1963, and then of course he never lived to see the actual thing. But but the civil rights, I actually remember, there was a guy named, I think it was Howard Smith, who was a representative, and the original civil rights bill had it prohibited discrimination on the basis of race, religion, national origin, but nothing about gender. And then Howard Smith wanted to kill that bill because he was against integration. He was from Virginia. He was against integration. So he added sex to the bill, and his opponents thought the reason he added sex was because he wanted to kill the bill. And he did want to kill the bill. But I remember when he said, and he thought sex should be part of it, the entire House of Representatives burst into hysterical laughter. Like, what could be more funny than women having civil rights, equal rights, and non-discrimination? I remember, I mean, I lived through all this, but the bill passed anyway with the sex, which was fantastic. And so that was 1964. So that had changed. But this whole, I'm trying to think, Betty Friedan in 1963 had written a book called The Feminine Mystique. That really set the stage for this, and she really depicted the problem, which is what I was seeing with my mother and with all their housewives that were on tranquilizers and wine, the Betty Ford syndrome, you know. And so that book really set the stage, but it didn't come up with any solutions. It was just, okay, here's the description, and we got to change it, or we got to get legislation. And and interestingly, this is also entwined with something else that a woman did in 1962. Rachel Carson wrote a book called Silent Spring, in which she revealed that DDT and the air pollutants were being absorbed by the plants that we eat and going into our bodies, and they were also going into the bodies of birds, and who are now laying eggs that with such thin shells that the baby birds couldn't hatch. And so she's Silent Spring, there's no more birds singing. And so this led to the ban of DDT and the Clean Air Act in 1963, which I also worked for. Clean Air Act, and then the Clean Water Act came later, but Clean Air Act. And then there was no Environmental Protection Agency. And a lot of us were working to get Environmental Protection Agency. We finally got an Environmental Protection Agency and so forth. So the civil rights based on race, and then the women's rights and the environmental thing were all kind of hand in hand coming up through the 60s and 70s. And the Title IX was part of that thrust. We're still working on that. And this is why I say democracy does work. It does. I mean, if all you looked at was the horrible thing that was going on in the House of Representatives and the Senate, you'd, oh my God, they can't get anything done. But when you look back over those 2 decades, we made a huge amount of progress in protecting human well-being and the planet, you know, clean air, clean water, and we're still working on it. Now we have more to go, but we're on this trajectory. And so women's rights was kind of tagging along.
Yeah.
And then so it was in 1964, I saw the Boston Marathon and fell in love with it
And then
and trained. And I trained for 2 years. And then in 66. And in 66, I ran it and it was front page headlines. Oh, in fact, I have them right
oh,
here.
you do?
I think,
Let's see.
yeah, you got to see this. This Hub Bride. Can you see that?
Oh, your background is blurring it. Like it's not.
Oh, it's blurry.
Yeah.
Anyway, it says Hub Bride, first gal to run marathon. There's a picture of me in my bathing suit. And it's that went out all around the world. My parents had friends in Malaysia and they wrote and said, oh, congratulations on your daughter and so forth. And when I got to the finish line, the governor of Massachusetts was there and shook my hand. And it really was a pivotal event in not just the event, but the fact that these headlines went out all over the world and people go, oh my God. And so this in some retrospective way was an answer to Betty Friedan's question, like, what do we do? It's like, this was a way a woman, and in fact, women used to call me up and said, I just ran around the block and I feel so good. And I said, for a lot of women, this is the first step towards their autonomy. They can reclaim their own sense of self and their own sense of power and their own sense of their physical body. They don't have to just be passive objects. And oh, can I show you one of my sculptures?
Absolutely. I would love to see one of your sculptures.
This, I don't know if you can see it. Can you see it?
Oh, I can. Yeah. If you hold it in front of yourself, then it won't blur. Oh,
Like
yes.
that?
Yes. Strong,
And it's a
powerful.
woman.
Yeah.
So my idea was a woman who is strong and swift and beautiful and very feminine. And this is this at the time was a completely different view of women. It was like, up until that time, if you look at all the classical paintings, they're all women languidly, sexually alluring, lying on couches, waiting for men, or their mothers with babies. Nothing like this, nothing like a strong, autonomous woman who is living life as a person. You know? And so this thing, and women saw that and they began to reverberate with it and they started to run. And the next year there were 2 of us running. The next year there were 5 of us running. And then finally in 1972, the Boston Marathon for the first time had a officially accredited women's division race, thanks to the petition of Nina Cusick. And she had gone before the AAU in late 1971. She brought the petition to accredit or sanction, as they say, but accredit women's marathons, which they did. And then fittingly, as you know, she won it in 1972. So she was really the first official woman to run and win the Boston Marathon. Prior to that time, from 66 through 71, it was what is now called the Pioneer Women's Division race.
Right. I love that you had enough vision, like what you just showed me with that sculpture, to imagine in a time when women were seen as sort of as you described, as often soft, and and that was what we associated with femininity. And then that you had this vision of like a strong and beautiful woman and turned it into a sculpture. I love that. What would you, before we go, I would ask you, like, what would you tell our audience? What would be your best advice for women now who perhaps are trying to do something and they don't have role models like you, or who are feeling discouraged in their environment?
I think a lot of women are trying to be something that they're not. They think they have to look like a model, or they think they have to have their hair in a certain way. They have to have a certain kind of clothes and so forth. The best thing a woman can be is be her authentic self and follow her inner passions and affirm her own autonomy in a way that empowers herself to be who she really is. And I truly believe everybody, men and women, have something to give the world. They came here in a sense to give the world a gift. And so many people millions of people all around the world and all around this country, they are doing good things for other people quietly, privately. It's like ordinary people are extraordinary, whether they're teaching school or driving trucks. And it don't get trapped by these stereotypes. Like I've said this before, if a woman wants to drive a truck, she's no less of a woman. If a man wants to knit doilies, he's no less of a man. And men and women they don't have to fit into these stereotypes. They can be who they truly are. And so I think women in particular have a tough time with their bodies, and they feel they have to look a certain way. You don't have to look a certain way. Just look who you are and be who you are, and speak the truth and say, feel what you feel, and just relax, I guess, and be yourself.
I absolutely love that. Bobbi, thank you so much for coming on and for sharing your story and your vast wisdom. I'm so impressed by you and your way of being your authentic self throughout your life. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me on. And I love to follow up with you and keep in touch and let me know how things go.
Absolutely.
Whether you run, ride, hike, or swim, you understand what it means to push harder, reach farther, and go the extra mile. This relentless drive runs in your blood. That's why Inside Tracker provides you with a personalized plan to build endurance, boost energy, and optimize your health for the long haul. Created by leading scientists in aging, genetics, and biometrics, Inside Tracker analyzes your blood, DNA, and fitness tracking data to identify where you're optimized and where you're not. You'll get a daily action plan with personalized guidance on the right exercise, nutrition, and supplementation for your body. And when you connect Inside Tracker to your Fitbit or Garmin, you'll also unlock real-time recovery pro tips after you complete your workout. It's like having your own personal trainer and nutritionist in your pocket. For a limited time, you can get 20% off the entire Inside Tracker store. Just go to insidetracker.com/feisty. That's insidetracker.com/feisty.
Feisty Media's Title IX series is proudly partnered with Vela Rosa. Vela Rosa is a women-owned and operated cycling apparel company that creates mix and match cycling wear to make women feel comfortable, confident, and beautiful. Created by two avid women cyclists, they know the importance of high-performance biking shorts and jerseys that fit a woman's body. It doesn't work to shrink and pink men's gear and expect it to work for women. Vela Rosa believes cycling wear should be fun, comfortable, and visible. You want to be bright and to be bold and be seen. Vela Rosa's collections are designed to mix and match with coordinating kit pieces that allow women to get more mileage out of their cycling wardrobes. New for 2022, a completely redesigned cycling tank, reflective safety tabs on all of their tops, and more long sleeve options for those chilly morning rides. You'll find tons of great reviews on their site from women who love Vela Rosa gear. Their 5-star rated shorts prove that when women try them, they love the fit. Particularly the yoga waistband, power leg bands, and the super soft, all black, what stains, chamois. Whether you like to ride pavement, gravel, dirt, or your local trail system, cycling is about the community. Join the sisterhood of cyclists that is Vela Rosa today. Enter Feisty15, that's all caps, FEISTY, number 15, at checkout, and receive 15% off of order of full-priced cycling wear at velarosacycling.com today. Active women need more protein. And if you're training hard, you need a lot more, like upwards of 100 grams a day or even more. That can be a challenge to get through meals alone some days, so a good protein powder like Neurify Plus from Previnex can help. Neurify Plus is a vegan-friendly protein powder that is low in sugar, high in essential branched chain amino acids, and contains probiotics and digestive enzymes, so it's easy to digest and doesn't cause the gassy feeling you can get with other protein powders. Neurify Plus is laboratory tested and contains no soy, gluten, dairy, preservatives, or artificial sweeteners. Listeners of this series can get 15% off their first time purchase by using the code Title9, that's all caps and the number 9 at checkout. Just go to Previnex.com, Previnex.com, and use the code Title9 at checkout for 15% off your first purchase. If you don't like it, the company offers a 100% money-back guarantee on all of their products within 30 days, no questions asked. Again, use the code Title9 at checkout for 15% off your first-time purchase at Previnex.com. That was so moving and so awesome. Like, that one's going to stick with me for quite a while. Great job, Sarah, by the way.
Oh, thank you. Oh, I'm glad to hear you say that, actually. Sorry, because I was a bit concerned when I recorded that like, you know, because Bobbi just has this way. It's like this free expression. Like, she's just like this one train of consciousness, which I love. Like, I was just kind of like metaphorically sitting at her feet, kind of going, okay, what other wisdom do you have for me? You know? So I'm really glad that you agree. And I hope that our audience agrees as well.
Oh, I loved it. It was the wisdom of a woman who has lived that life and have left that legacy and all of that space. She deserved every second of it. So that was wonderful. Who do we have coming up next week?
So next week we have Markeisha Henderson, and she is the athletics director at Agnes Scott College. And I think, you know, we have a couple different, I think 3 different athletic directors. Whoa, say that 3 times fast, who are interviewed here. And I think part of like the legacy of Title IX has to do with the coaching and even like this, and even sports leadership and women getting into more of those roles. So I'm really excited to hear about that. And the interview is done by Shauna Payne Gold, who is a podcast host for Feisty with Unfazed. And I love that podcast. She works full-time in the DEI space. And so Shauna's so smart and full of wisdom. So I'm really excited to hear from those 2 next week.
Excellent. Tune in then. 9 Voices for Title IX, powered by Inside Tracker, is a Feisty Media production.
This episode was produced and edited by the amazing Amelia Perry.